crap, I read 16 novels, 1 novella, and 2 graphic novels this month. No wonder I have next to no social life. Salutations! Welcome to Loving the Language of Literacy. My name is Sophia Lee, and today I'm doing my January 2015 reading wrap-up. And I read 15 books that I own. I'm going to go through these books extremely fast, and if I have written or video reviews for them, I'm going to skim really briefly on my thoughts because I have 19 books to go through, and this is the most that I've ever read in a month. I beat May of 2014, so I feel pretty proud of myself, and this month was a great way to start off the new year. The first book I read this month was Ready Player One by Ernest Cline. I have a video review in the process of editing. It was way too much footage, so I'm still, a month later, 30 days later, working on it. This book is set in a virtual world called The Oasis, and the creator of The Oasis, James Halliday, recently passed away, so people all over The Oasis, including our main character Parzival, is trying to hunt down the 3 keys as well as the 3 gates that James Halliday left, and whoever goes through the 3rd gate first gets James Halliday's entire fortune. So it's a race against the clock. This book is full of video game references and 80s pop culture, so if you're a fan of either of those, I would highly recommend it. I knew absolutely nothing about those 2 things, and I still loved and enjoyed this book so freaking much. And I gave it 5 out of 5 stars. It's the best book I read in January, and the first book I read of the year, so thumbs up to me for good choices. And it's in my top 10 favorite books of all time as of now. The second book I read this month was my very first graphic novel ever, and that is In the Shadow of No Towers by Art Spiegelman. And if that name sounds familiar, it is because he is the author of the critically acclaimed graphic novel Mouse, volumes 1 and 2. And this book features the mice again, but this is telling a perspective from 9/11. And it's extremely interesting. The book itself is humongous, like not in terms of length, but in terms of just sheer size. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars, wasn't in love with it, and I find out later this month that I don't actually like graphic novels that much. The third book I read was The Retribution of Mara Dyer. I have a full series overview and book talk for this book with all of my spoilery thoughts. It's the 3rd and final book in the Mara Dyer trilogy, so I'm not going to synopsize it, but basically it was a satisfying conclusion to me, even though most of the hype surrounding it disagreed with that, my opinion. And this is basically about a girl named Mara Dyer who hallucinates and thinks that she is a sociopath. So, fun times there. The next book I read was actually a Hanukkah present, and that was Bossy Pants by Tina Fey. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. This is Tina Fey's memoir, full of little essays about her life and things that she's learned, and of course it is full of laughs, because how can you have Tina Fey without laughter? I was so excited to see the Golden Globes monologue between Tina Fey and Amy Poehler, because in the month of November I read Amy Poehler's memoir, and of course I had to read her BFF's memoir as well. So if you have any recommendations for me for comedic memoirs, I'd love to read them because it's a very nice gateway into nonfiction without it being completely factual. The 5th book I read this month was for a blog tour, and that is Raven Chronicles of Steel by Pauline Creedon. I gave it 4 out of 5 stars. It is a steampunk novel featuring a female assassin, and everyone knows because of Throne of Glass, I absolutely adore female kick-ass assassins, and they're just the most awesome thing ever. This was a really interesting take with a lot of metaphors and descriptive writing, and I really enjoyed it for a self-published book especially. The 6th book I read this month was The Duff, Designated Ugly Fat Friend by Cody Keplinger. I do an entire book-to-movie adaptation discussion where I discuss my hopes and fears for the ways producers will change the book from the page to the silver screen, and I have a written review for this as well. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. It is one of the best contemporaries I've ever read because of its blatant rawness where everything is just thrown at you and you don't even have time to catch your breath. The next book I read this month was one that I've been meaning to read since it came out in March 2014, and there was so much hype surrounding this book, but unfortunately hype is what killed this for me, as well as the promise of political intrigue, which I did not receive. And that is The Winter's Curse by Marie Rutkowski. This is a very hyped up novel with quite a beautiful cover about an army general's daughter named Kestrel who buys a slave from the marketplace and they happen to fall in love. It is a mixture of historical fiction, fantasy, and science fiction, so I have no clue how that works out. But I discussed this in my review. I couldn't really pinpoint what genre this was. I wasn't a big fan of the romance, and overall this book generally fell flat for my expectations. But I do want to read the sequel because everyone's raving about that even more, so I want to see if the story actually improved or if they just loved Marie Rutkowski in the first place and think the sequel is better. The next book I read this month was The Start of Me and You by Emery Lord, which is coming out on March 31st, 2015. So mark this on your calendars. It is my first cutesy love story that I absolutely adored besides Amy and Roger's Epic Detour. Emery Lord is a wonderful writer. This book was so much more. It dealt with grief and loss and depression and a girl trying to find herself and put her life back together. And this was just such a relatable book, especially because of my own personal situation. So I love the main character. I love this book, and you have to check it out when it comes out in March. The next book I have here is one that I also have done a video review on, and that is All Fall Down by Ali Carter. This is obviously the ARC edition, but I gave it 2 out of 5 stars. I disliked it immensely. Yeah, not Ali Carter's best work. I discussed how I've read and loved the Gallagher Girls as well as the High Society trilogy, but this just fell flat and seemed entirely different than the rest of her novels. I didn't like the characters, I didn't like the plot, but I actually have to read the sequel because of the last darn page and its cliffhanger, so thanks a lot, Ali Carter. The next book I read this month was another ARC, and that is Mark of the Thief by Jennifer A. Nielsen. This is coming out on the 24th of February, and my video review will be up for this very soon. It's about a 15-year-old-ish boy named Nick who is a slave in the Roman mines, and he's brought to Rome after he gets cursed by Julius Caesar's bulla, which is featured on the front. And he gets these magical powers. It's a great middle grade. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. Jennifer Nielsen is my second favorite middle grade author of all time. I respect her a lot, and I cannot wait to see what the rest of the world thinks of The Mark of the Thief. Guys, I finally read These Broken Stars by Amy Kaufman and Megan Spooner. Every one of my Twitter friends has just been bugging me and bugging me and bugging me to read this. There's been so much hype considering This Shattered World just came out. That will probably be featured in my February wrap-up. But this is basically a Titanic-like space odyssey between the daughter of the richest man in the universe, Lilac LaRue, and a military general person. I don't know the ranks at all. Carver. They get stranded on this planet in the middle of space after their spaceship thing crashes, and this was a good book. I gave it only 3.5 out of 5 stars. I didn't love it nearly as much as everyone else did. I had my own issues with it because of the pacing of the plot and the actual revelations in the end, but I really want to read the sequel to find out what happens. And if you don't know this, the Starbound trilogy is actually a trilogy of companion novels, so the second book, The Shattered World, does not include Tarver and Lilac, but they do make appearances, but they are not the main characters. But I still am desperate to get my hands on the sequel so I can find out what the hell happened, because things in here were just really mind-effing. I was on quite a cutesy contemporary kick, which means that my next book was To All the Boys I've Loved Before by Jenny Han, my very first Jenny Han book. And I adored it a lot. I gave it 4.5 out of 5 stars. I read it along with Alex of the Books Buzz. I like her channel. She's a great booktuber and one of my good friends on Twitter. And this book was quite interesting. It's about a girl named Lara Jean. She's the middle child in a Korean American family, and she writes a letter of closure to every boy she's ever loved, which is a total of 6, and she gets tangled up a bit with one of them. So it's really funny to see the reactions of the boys who received her letters and who actually sent these letters out in the first place. I have a written review of this up on my blog if you want to know more. The next book was my first ever Colleen Hoover, and that is Hopeless. It is a very good bridge into the new adult genre. I've never actually read a hyped up mainstream new adult book, so this was quite interesting to read. It's about a girl named Sky who gets tangled up with this boy named Holder, and although this book is not categorized under mystery in its genre, it kind of should be because of the revelations that happen and unfold because of their relationship. And I gave this 4 out of 5 stars because Colleen Hoover is just a masterful writer that is amazing. The very same day that I finished Hopeless was the day I picked up Never Never, which is a co-authored novel by Colleen Hoover, big surprise, and Taryn Fisher. This is another new adult novel, but it's kind of a lot more on the YA section. I would categorize it almost as paranormal or just magical-ish realism. And it's about a boy and a girl who become alert on Wednesday at 11 a.m. in their math class, I believe, and they have no idea what's happening. They have no idea who they are, and they're the only 2 people that don't know what's going on. And over the next 48 hours, they try to figure out things, but then things happen at the end of the 48 hours, and basically, you do not want to be spoiled for this book. I gave it 3 out of 5 stars just because I wasn't enraptured. I wasn't on the edge of my seat trying to figure out what happened and why they were like the way they were, and I wasn't very invested in the characters either, sadly. Then I read the Hopeless novella, which is Finding Cinderella, also by Colleen Hoover. This was, I think, 100 pages if it was actually in print, but I gave it 3.5 out of 5 stars. It was okay. It followed Sky's best friend 6 as well as a new boy that we haven't met previously. It was basically their relationship and their kind of love story in novella form. I think it wasn't entirely needed for the series, but it was just a nice addition to read, as novellas usually are. Then I read Poison Study by Maria V. Schneider, which is not the most hyped up, but a well-respected high fantasy, very long series. I was about to say trilogy. And it is about a girl named Yelena who was imprisoned because she murdered her old master's son. Wow, nice girl. And by law, she was offered the position of food tester, so she becomes the palace's food tester. And obviously, this is a very dangerous job. The 18th book I read this month was Losing It by Cora Carmack. It's my first Cora Carmack novel that I read because of Colleen Hoover, because she just seemed like a standard new adult author to read. This was such a fast book. I sped through it, but I only gave it 3 out of 5 stars because it kind of fell flat for my expectations. This is about a woman who gets romantically involved with another man, and she finds out that he's her college professor. So obviously, that's not entirely appropriate, unless, of course, we're watching Pretty Little Liars, which I hate the show and I hate the book, so that's a different subject altogether. I liked the dynamic between the 2 characters, especially his British accent, but besides that, I didn't feel that invested in their relationship, and I wasn't rooting for them the way I should have been. Plus, that kind of relationship isn't really my cup of tea to read about. Not the kind of book I turn to normally. The last book I read this month, and I hope I actually have read this book in this month, because after I finish filming this video and eat dinner, I am planning on finishing it. I have 200 pages left, and this is like 8 o'clock at night, so pray I finish this in January. And that is the wonderful, wonderful National Book Award finalist, and basically on everyone's favorite list, and that is All the Light We Cannot See by Anthony Doerr. And yes, this is way unusual than my normal reading taste. It is an adult historical fiction novel. It is beautifully written with these gorgeous metaphors I've never thought of before. If you are a poet or if you are a writer, just read this novel, because even if you hate the book, the writing style is something to learn from. It is absolutely gorgeous. It is quite thick, but not necessarily dense. I don't know what the ending is yet, because I haven't finished it. And it's not very fast-paced, but it seems fast-paced because the chapters are at most 4 pages long, and it's in third person, but we go through 3 different characters' perspective. This is a book about a girl named Marie who is blind, and she's in the middle of World War II and has to go to live with her uncle in the countryside. Meanwhile, there is Werner, who is a teenage German boy who is part of the Hitler Youth and has an unusual knack for working with radios. The stories meet at the end, and I'm projecting I'm going to give this 4 out of 5 stars because it's not exactly what I expected it to be. Anyways, thank you so much for watching and sticking through the 19 books I had to talk about in this wrap-up. I will have my February TBR out soon, as well as a mini January wrap-up because I did not buy that many books, thank God, because my wallet cannot handle it anymore. I've literally bought like 15 ebooks this month, and those actually add up when you think about it. Tell me in the comments below what you read this month. What was your favorite book? What was your least favorite book? Mine for sure was All Fell Down by Ally Carter. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you had a good time. Keep calm and read on, and I will see you in my next video. Goodbye! I'm only holding 7 books that I actually own, but this weighs so much. I'm gonna smile weakly like I can actually handle holding all these with my weak arms. Ask me to run 10 miles and I can do it, but ask me to lift 5 pounds, that's pretty hard.